I caught my wife with her affair partner in our bed and kicked him out of my house. Oh man, this is going to be long. I'm a 44-year-old guy, and my soon-to-be ex-wife, Jessica, is 39. We've been married for 11 years, no kids. We were both pretty out of shape until 2 years ago when I got a blood test back that said I was at risk for diabetes, gout, and high blood pressure. That scared the hell out of me. Slowly, we both started living a much healthier lifestyle. I dropped from 257 pounds to 187, and Jessica went from 183 to 143. We felt amazing, and thankfully I never developed any of those illnesses. We started hitting the gym almost every day in the afternoons, where her affair partner, let's call him Brad, worked as a personal trainer. As Jessica got in better shape, I started noticing how other guys would check her out, and honestly, I felt proud. She's got an impressive figure, and her legs are incredible. Of course, Brad wasn't any different. I'd seen him eyeing up women's butts a few times, and he liked to show off how ripped he was. Once we became regulars at the gym, I could tell Jessica was enjoying the attention she was getting from other men. One day, we were both using the elliptical machines, and there was a cable machine in front of us. Brad took off his shirt and started doing crossovers. I looked at Jessica with a "can you believe this guy?" expression, but she was just staring at him, licking her lips. I glanced back at Brad, and he was grinning. That crushed me. I mean, I was getting in shape, but I didn't look anywhere near as fit as Brad. On the way home, I casually mentioned how Brad seemed to be showing off, and Jessica acted all innocent, saying, "Really? I didn't notice." I said, "You were staring." She shrugged it off, saying she didn't remember and must have been lost in thought. I let it go, but after that, I noticed they were talking more at the gym. A few weeks later, Jessica was doing squats on the Smith machine when Brad came over to help her. He was grabbing her by the waist, and I felt my blood boiling. Once she finished her first set, I went over and, not so politely, said, "I've got this from here." Brad just smirked and said, "No problem, buddy." Like he calls everyone buddy. Jessica could tell I was pissed from my tone, and she sighed, "Oh my God, really?" I told her we'd talk about it at home. When we got home, things blew up. She called me immature and jealous. I told her Brad was obviously trying to sleep with her, and she admitted she knew that but insisted she'd never cheat on me. So, I asked why she let him touch her, and she claimed she didn't want to be rude. After an hour of arguing, we agreed to switch gyms. We started going to a different gym, but Jessica was still mad at me for months after, saying I didn't trust her. About 3 months after we changed gyms, a great opportunity came up at my job that required me to work in the afternoons. We talked about it, and I took the position. It meant we had to work out at different times. I went in the mornings, and Jessica kept going in the afternoons. That's when everything started going downhill. Jessica became even more distant, and we barely talked. I'd text her, telling her about my day, how much I missed her, even sent her funny memes. Her replies were short and uninterested. "Yes. Okay. Same here. Haha." I was worried, so I suggested we try couples therapy. She turned it around on me, saying I was the one with trust issues and needed therapy. I was so desperate to fix things that I agreed. So, the following year, 2022, I went to therapy, but nothing changed with Jessica. We stopped being intimate, and she always claimed she wasn't in the mood. I snooped through her phone, but didn't find anything suspicious. I even checked her car for a second phone, nothing. I looked at her map history, and it just showed her going from home to work, to the gym, and back. Whenever I tried to talk to her about us, she just brushed it off, saying she was going through a mid-40s phase and it would pass. I didn't have any solid proof of cheating, so I just kept working and worrying. We live in a condo, and there's this friendly security guard named Mr. Peterson. One day, he was massaging his shoulder and mentioned that he'd strained it moving a heavy sofa. I sympathized with him, and then he casually mentioned, "Maybe you can set me up with your wife's masseuse." Confused, I asked him, "Who?" He said, "You know, the guy who came by yesterday to give Mrs. Jessica a massage." It took me a moment to process what he said, and then I asked, "Do you have a video of him?" I must have looked pale because Mr. Peterson quickly pulled out his phone. And guess who it was? Yep, Brad. Apparently, he'd been coming over to massage my wife multiple times. I took the day off from work and started investigating. I borrowed a coworker's car and followed Jessica that afternoon. She parked at the mall where the gym is, and sure enough, there was Brad waiting for her. They were giggling, hugging, and acting like a couple. It was crushing. They walked a few blocks into a residential area, but when I tried to follow, the guard stopped me and asked if I needed help. I just said, "What a nice couple. Do you know them?" He told me they seemed like newlyweds but couldn't give me any more information. I called Jessica, but she didn't pick up. I walked back to her car in the mall parking lot, wondering why this place wasn't showing up in her map history. I called her again, and that's when I heard her phone ringing inside her car. That's how she was hiding it. I found out that she hadn't been going to the gym in over 8 months. That night was the last time I ever slept in the same bed with her. I returned the car and went home, calling my parents. Thankfully, my dad answered. I told him everything while sobbing, and he comforted me, saying I needed to gather evidence. My marriage was obviously over, and he promised to reach out to a lawyer friend who's excellent at divorce cases. Jessica called me after seeing my missed calls, and I told her I was already home. She casually said, "I'm on my way back from the gym. My legs are killing me."
Yeah, I bet.
When she got home, she asked, "Why do you look like you've been crying?" Somehow I kept my cool and smiled, saying I'd come down with the flu, which was why I left work early. I told her not to get too close in case she caught it. I even claimed I'd sleep in the guest room. She agreed, and I spent that night silently crying, unable to sleep. Around midnight, I heard her giggling. She was probably texting Brad, but I couldn't find any evidence of it. Then it hit me. How did I not see this earlier? Brad was probably disguised as one of her female co-workers. While Jane was showering in the morning, I took her phone and set up a session on my laptop before putting it back in its original spot. We both have the ability to unlock each other's phones, which made it easier for me. The session works as long as her phone is near my laptop or connected to the same Wi-Fi network. That's when I noticed something odd. Under a woman's name, the profile picture featured a dumbbell. I clicked in and saw that most of the conversations had been erased. I assumed they were using code words for their chats in case I snooped, like, "Can you deliver the papers to my desk?" I knew she didn't have a desk at her workplace. Another message read, "Going to the meeting. Where are you?" At the top of the thread was a message that said, "The boss is in his office. He's clueless." Pretty clever, I thought, since I knew her boss was a woman, and I must be the boss in this situation. Just then, Jane emerged from the shower and looked at me. "You look worse. Why not stay with your parents?" she asked. I dismissed her suggestion, focusing on gathering more evidence. After Jane left the room, I called my dad, who provided me with the name and number of a lawyer. I reached out to him and explained everything that had happened. He informed me that the screenshots I had taken from my laptop wouldn't hold up as evidence. They weren't in AP's name, and Jane had been smart enough to leave snippets of conversation that seemed innocent enough. I could take pictures of them together at the mall, but she could easily argue that they were just friends. Plus, I couldn't invade a private residence without permission, as that could land me in even deeper trouble. At work, I was operating on autopilot, my mind racing with thoughts on how to gather proof. I considered installing hidden cameras in my house, but Brad rarely came over, and I was worried that Jane would discover them. Then an idea struck me. What if I removed myself from the situation entirely? I texted Jane, telling her I was sure there was a bug in the house and that I would be staying at my parents' for a while because I might need some assistance. She seemed to like the idea and said she would miss me but would call me every day. After hanging up, I reached out to my dad and brother. When I got home, I found that she had already packed a suitcase for me. It was clear she was eager to be rid of me. I told her I needed to grab my laptop. Then I took a quick look at her messages. "Boss will be out of the office? Want to come to my desk?" She had sent that right after I mentioned I was convinced there was a bug in the house. Good, she took the bait. We didn't have dinner together, and there were no kisses or hugs. I noticed her glance at her watch twice. As I reached the door, I said, "I'll miss you." I expected her to slam the door behind me, but instead, She walked me to my car. And then I was off. My dad and brother were outside, waiting for Brad to show up, but he never did. After about 30 minutes, it struck me. Why did she walk me to my car? Of course, Brad must have already been inside, probably waiting in her car. It would look very suspicious if her massage therapist showed up at this hour. I hurried back, sneaking into my house. I could hear music coming from the bedroom along with muffled moans. Next to the door, I spotted a sofa piled with their clothes. I turned on my phone to record and pushed open the bedroom door. There she was, my wife, the love of my life for 11 years, on all fours with Brad behind her. I managed to capture a couple of seconds of their shocked faces when they saw me standing there. Jane screamed and covered herself with a blanket, while Brad instantly adopted an aggressive stance, walking naked toward me. I had caught him in the act with my wife. "Why don't you go for a walk, buddy?" he shouted angrily. In a split second, I struck his throat with an open hand, a move I'd seen in the Mel Gibson movie Ransom. Within moments, Brad was choking and gasping as he fell to his knees on the floor. "Get out of my house," I yelled, kicking him out. I tossed his clothes at him just as my dad, brother, and Mr. P arrived. "I'll handle it from here," I said, slamming the door shut behind me. Jane was still in bed, trembling and covering herself. I said, "I have never hurt you, nor will I. Get dressed. I'll wait for you in the living room." While I waited, I sent the video to my lawyer, who replied, "I'm really sorry you're going through this, but jackpot." A few minutes later, Jane appeared, avoiding eye contact with me. I started recording our conversation. "Why?" I asked. She didn't respond. "Was I such an awful husband to you?" Tears started flowing from her eyes, but still, no answer. "Do you love him?" I pressed. She shook her head, but words wouldn't come. Frustrated, I stood up and slammed my hand on the table. "Say something, Jane. Damn it." Her eyes widened, and she began trembling again, like a scared puppy. I had never raised my voice at her before. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "My lawyer will reach out to you about the divorce. You need to get a lawyer too." Finally, she spoke. "We can fix this." "Fix what?" I shot back. "Our marriage was over the moment Brad entered the picture, and you chose him over me." "It was a mistake," she replied. "No, it wasn't. It was a choice. You made your decision, and this is the consequence." "What did you think would happen when I found out?" Silence again. "Go to your sister's place and tell her the truth, or I will show her the video." She walked to the bedroom and started packing. I followed her, watching closely. For the past 2 days, I had been trying to convince myself that my wife was gone. The person I had shared my life with was not the same. Yet, as I watched her neatly fold her clothes into the suitcase, her graceful movements and those little things I loved about her struck me hard. I retreated to the spare room and broke down in tears. I heard the sound of the main door closing behind her. She picked up her clothes from the sofa, made the bed where I had caught them, and I dropped to the floor. Much later, I called my dad. He informed me that Brad wanted to file charges, but Mr. P told him he hadn't signed in, making him a trespasser. The condo could sue him, so Brad dropped the charges and left. My curious brother pressed his ear against the door, but my dad yanked him away and took him to the car. I was completely wiped out. The last few days had been rough on my sleep, and I felt like I could collapse in the spare room. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages from Jane. Apologies and pleas for another chance. I just blocked her number. Then my sister-in-law called, and it turned out Jane hadn't mentioned anything about what happened, just that we were having a fight. I thought to myself how relieved I was that my father-in-law wasn't around to witness Jane's actions. She had always been his favorite, being the youngest. My mother-in-law was struggling with senile dementia, too. This all unfolded a week ago, and soon Jane would be served with divorce papers. Hey everyone, I'm back with a juicy update, and I think you're going to enjoy this as much as I do. Before diving into the details, I want to clarify a few points. First, thank you to everyone who reached out with advice, congratulations, or just to show they care. Reading the support from strangers has been overwhelming. Honestly, I'm grateful from the bottom of my heart. Second, English isn't my first language, so I might have messed up a few sentences and mixed up some prepositions. Apologies for that. Oh, and I mistakenly said Jane was doing sit-ups when she was actually doing squats. Third, to those doubting the authenticity of my story, you're entitled to your opinion. I hope my experience can help someone in the future, just as others have helped me. Fourth, regarding how I confronted Jane's affair partner. It wasn't some ninja move, just a quick chop to the throat. Honestly, I was lucky to react before Brad did. I won't lie. Seeing him on the floor gasping felt pretty good. Fifth, some of you discovered a post I made in Ask Reddit a month before D-Day, but it never went up because I didn't understand the community rules. Quick recap. Jane and I had been trying to become parents for 10 years. After saving for 8, we purchased 3 opportunities at a top reproductive clinic, but all 3 failed. Jane started her affair during the 3rd attempt. The clinic had tested my blood, revealing my family's health history, which made me aware of potential risks for diabetes, gout, and strokes. I should probably thank them for that. Someone speculated that Jane had an abortion during the 3rd attempt because it could have been Brad's baby, but that's not possible. She struggles to conceive naturally. The embryos were fertilized in vitro and then implanted directly into her womb. I had tried to revisit the idea of parenthood, but she just told me, I don't want kids anymore. So I dropped it. I'm convinced Brad isn't related to that decision. This point will matter later. Now let's get into the update. It's been 12 days since D-Day. What have I been up to? D-Day +1 Friday I had a good chat with Mr. P. He admitted he faked his shoulder injury just to give me a heads up about Brad. He also mentioned that a nosy neighbor witnessed me kicking Brad out of my apartment, so soon enough the whole condo will know my situation. My brother helped me change the locks. After he left, I felt incredibly lonely and broke down. I called my job to take a day off. Later that night, I spoke with my lawyer, who informed me he was drafting the divorce papers. He couldn't start until he had evidence. So, my divorce would be labeled as divorce by mutual consent, which is easier than fault-based divorce, a more complicated route. He advised me not to share the video yet. Jane would be served in 2 weeks. D-Day +2, Sat my sister-in-law visited, and I showed her the video. On the way to her house, I saw Jane's car parked outside. Once I got back home, I still felt crushed and cried a little more. D-Day +3, Son, I went to see my parents, and my mom cried alongside me. She had really liked Jane. My dad and I discussed my finances and properties. When I returned home, Mr. P mentioned that Jane and Brad had both come by, though strangely at different times. Jane arrived in the morning and saw my car wasn't there, but her key wouldn't work anymore. She asked Mr. P if he knew where I had gone, and he handed her my lawyer's card instead. Later in the afternoon, Brad came looking for Jane, but Mr. P told him, Mrs. Jane doesn't live here anymore. He then asked to see me, but Mr. P told him I was away. Brad left without saying a word. I wanted to know how Jane was doing. Was she sad? Did she look healthy? Did she ask about me at all? But then I remembered D-Day and just thanked Mr. P before heading inside. I cried a lot again. D-Day +4, Mon, I didn't want to. But something I learned from all you champions was to hit the gym hard. So, I searched for a new gym near my workplace and had a great session. I felt pretty good afterward. When I got home, I didn't cry this time. Instead, I started removing all of Jane's pictures. D-Day +5, Tuesday I had a meeting with my lawyer to review my assets. Thankfully, my dad had made Jane sign a prenup, which meant she couldn't touch anything I owned before our marriage, mainly my house. Anything acquired after we got married would be split 50-50ths, and I could get a payout for her adultery. I might fight for more, but everything reminded me of her, and I just wanted to start fresh. As I left my house, I caught 2 neighbors whispering. When they noticed me, they pretended they hadn't seen anything and greeted me as they walked by. I knew this was coming. Afterward, I went to the gym and then to work. This routine continued for the week, so I'll skip the details. D-Day +6, Wed, nothing much happened. I only had Facebook as my social media, where I ignored messages asking me to contact Jane. I eventually deleted my account and opened Reddit, spending time reading about others who had overcome similar situations. Felt nice to see their stories. D-Day +7, Thursday I began writing about my experience and posted it before heading to the gym. While at work, I was amazed at how many people reacted to my story. I responded to several comments. D-Day +8, Friday I spent the morning reading and replying to comments. It felt great to see that people appreciated my post. 2 comments stuck with me. One suggested reporting Brad to my old gym, and another said my home felt tainted, and I should seek a fresh start. So, before hitting the gym, I started looking for real estate agents to either sell or rent my house. I didn't feel comfortable living there anymore. I hadn't stepped into my bedroom since D-Day. I was sleeping in the spare room and didn't want to continue this way. D-Day +9, sat to avoid being bothered by Jane. I decided to spend the day outside. She did show up and even visited my parents and brother. They texted me saying, "Jane came by." I replied, "Thank you, I don't want to discuss her yet." D-Day +10, son, I spent the day with my parents, and we took a trip 2 hours away from the city. It was a blast. I wasn't sure if Jane came by while I was gone. My dad suggested I rent the house instead of selling it, and I agreed. When I returned home, Mr. P informed me that Brad had come by again, this time alone. He asked for me, but Mr. P told him I was away, and Brad left silently. D-Day +11, Mon, on Monday morning, I returned to my old gym. I wasn't sure if Brad would be around. He usually worked in the afternoon, but given that he was with Jane during those hours, I figured he might have switched shifts. He wasn't there. While waiting to speak to Frank, the gym owner, I bumped into an old janitor who used to chat with me. He casually mentioned, "Say hi to Miss Jane. I guess everyone now knows about our split." I smiled at him. Finally, Frank came to see me and I asked about Brad. He told me Monday was Brad's day off, but that he had asked for more hours and now worked from Tuesday to Sunday mornings. I then explained my reason for being there and showed him the video. Frank listened attentively before finally saying, "You're not going to like this." I thought, what now? He called the receptionist to bring in Harry, another coach and Brad's friend with a big beard. Frank asked Harry to share what he knew about Brad's girlfriend. Buckle up. This is where it gets interesting. According to Harry, Brad is completely smitten with Jane, and Frank confirmed it. He told me that Brad had received numerous complaints about his behavior with female members, but recently he had changed. No complaints, and he's been acting professionally. And then Harry dropped a bombshell. Brad is trying to get Jane a gym membership. Can you believe it? D-Day +12. Tuesday, I was already set to do leg day when I received a text from my lawyer with a "do not respond" message. He explained that Jane had decided to reach out, begging for a second chance. The lawyer asked if I was ready to proceed with the divorce papers. I told him yes and asked him to go ahead. I'll share the whole video with everyone once the divorce is finalized. As I processed this information, a strange sensation began in my chest, creeping up my throat until it erupted in my mouth. I couldn't help but laugh. An insane, Joker-like cackle. Tears even welled up in my eyes. Frank and Harry exchanged bewildered glances. I thought, oh sweet karma. Thank you. Once I calmed down, still sporting a huge grin, Harry asked what was happening. Frank explained, "This is Brad's girlfriend's husband." Harry's expression shifted to shock. "Oh man, this is bad. This is really messed up." With that, he left. We then turned our attention to firing Brad. Frank mentioned he had to report the situation to the coach association, not the real name, emphasizing that he had to let him go. If Jane was a gym member, Frank's gym could face legal repercussions. Regarding Brad's coaching license, I needed to draft a legal document detailing how Brad was the reason for my divorce, including the case number and the video evidence. My attorney would hand the video over to the coach association's lawyer, and unfortunately, I couldn't share it. Brad was set to lose his license with that association but could apply for another one elsewhere, though that would take months. I asked if Brad could appeal, and Frank replied that he might, but it would be a futile effort. The association doesn't tolerate such behavior. Plus, Brad likely didn't have the funds to hire a representative. Then I recalled the residential area where Brad had been with Jane, initially thinking he was well off. Frank leaned closer, his voice tense. What residential area? I pulled it up on my Maps app. You followed them to this place? He demanded. I did, on D-Day -1. Frank's anger flared. That's where my late father's house is. After Frank's father passed, he inherited the property. Any obsolete or needing repair equipment goes there. He had lent Brad a key to store some items but had never given him permission to stay. Brad likely had a copy of that key and might be living there illegally. Frank vowed to investigate, noting that there were numerous cameras in that area. As I was leaving the gym, I heard someone call out, Mr. OP. Mr. OP. Wait, it was Harry. He expressed his sorrow over the situation, adding that Brad had never mentioned who his girlfriend was, only that he met her at XXX Mall. I thanked him and took a step toward the exit when he rushed after me. Can you tell me what happened? He asked. Pretty much what you heard. He was sleeping with my wife, and now I'm divorcing her. Another step forward. What will happen to Brad? That depends on Frank and the coach association. I tried to take yet another step, but Harry pressed on. But how are you handling it? This was odd. I stared at Harry, remembering Brad had been to my house twice. You called Brad, and he's on his way here, right? You're just buying time. Am I wrong? A guilty expression crossed his face. Please, Mr. OP, talk to him. He's really desperate. He was crying yesterday. His your wife, isn't returning his calls. Tell me, why should I care if he's rotting in hell? Harry insisted. I'll be here with you, so you won't be scared. I laughed. Scared? Of that weakling. He didn't tell you I kicked him out of my house naked. Did he? Harry seemed doubtful. Fine, let's see what he wants. I noticed the cameras in the vicinity and took a seat at the reception table. I figured Brad wasn't stupid enough to attack me, but curiosity was piqued about what he wanted. 10 minutes later, he came running and spotted me waiting. He extended his hand, but I crossed my arms, leaving him hanging. What the hell do you want? I shot at him, glaring into his eyes. He sat down across from me. Listen, buddy. Stop right there. We're not buddies. Mr. S, the janitor, is my buddy. You are not. He looked apologetic. Okay, my bad. I just want to say I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you, and I really care about Jane. Well, you just told me 3 lies. You're not sorry, you meant to destroy my life, and you only care about yourself. His demeanor shifted from apologetic to annoyed. Okay, whatever, man. Just tell me where Jane is. Last I saw her was when I kicked her cheating ass out of my house after I kicked you out naked. I could see Harry eavesdropping, and Brad's face flushed red. That was a cheap shot. I should sue you. As far as I know, you entered my home illegally, and maybe you were raping my wife. I have videos of you leaving, but you didn't sign in. He changed his tone again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just tell me what you want from me. Please tell Jane I need to speak to her. Just then, Frank rushed in, likely having seen the feed from the cameras. Everything okay here? Everything is fine, Frank. I was just telling this sissy what I want. I stood up, leaning in closer to Brad. What I want is what's coming for you, what you deserve, what the law has prepared for you. I want to crush your dreams just like you crushed mine. You want kids? Guess what? You'll never have them. What's that supposed to? Brad began, but Frank interrupted, telling him to meet in his office. Harry looked impressed, pulling Brad aside. Dude, you're in deep shit. I finally left. D-Day +12, Tuesday. I feel ready to face Jane now. I'm still grinning while I type this. So, how have you been?